Well met, and welcome to Week 8, Day 3 of the Hearthstone Global Games, or, as we've taken to calling it, the Australia-New Zealand Bowl. My name is Robert Wing, and I'm joined once again on the desk by Cora. And you done with the Kiwi?
One sec.
We're done with Kiwi. Okay.
Yeah, we're good.
Cora, are you excited for this inaugural Australia-New Zealand Bowl?
It is going to be a slobber knocker, Rob. This is the battle of two countries that have battled in other sports, but those sports don't matter now.
Because
Hearthstone is the sport that matters. It's what we're casting. That
makes it all the more relevant, at least to us. So let's go ahead and take a look real quick at the Hearthstone Global Games format. As you guys can see, we are almost through Stage 1. That is 8 groups of 6 teams that have been participating in a 10-week round robin. Soon on the way is Stage 2. We're going to whittle down the teams to 6 groups of 4 teams, and they will participate in a 3-week round robin. But name of the game is getting to that all-important 16-team single elimination stage, culminating with a top 4 advancing to a live LAN finals later this year. So we are almost done with Stage 1. A lot of action basically going to decide who's going to advance in the coming weeks.
Yeah, absolutely will. And we still have some groups that are not yet decided. Group A, for instance, very close in the standings still, even though we only have a couple weeks of play left. Group B starting to shape up. We can see United States and Netherlands sitting right at the top. A lot of 4-0s in match record throughout the groups, but no 5-0s yet.
Yeah, we still have teams playing out the rest of their schedules, and as you see, we do have some teams, as you pointed out, that are 4-0, 4-1, that are kind of figuring out exactly where they're going to end up. But in a lot of situations in these final weeks of Stage 1, we're going to have tiebreakers being all important. And if you don't know about this at home, the tiebreakers are going to go in order of head-to-head match record and then ultimately match score. So as you can see, we are starting to piece it together, but in groups like the one we'll be covering tonight, Group C, there's a lot of upward trajectory for some of the lower score teams based on how these final matches go. Again, tonight, New Zealand versus Australia actually decides a lot for Group C.
Yeah, Australia currently sitting at a 1-2 record, New Zealand at 2-1. So if New Zealand actually wins this match, Australia is, I believe, mathematically eliminated from making it to Stage 2 of this tournament. So a lot on the line for these guys, you know, aside from all of their national pride really coming to the table today.
Right, obviously both teams want to win in advance, but this one's a little bit special. As you pointed out, these teams have historically had sports rivalries. They're very much sibling countries, New Zealand and Australia. So the first match of the evening going to be from Group C, as we said, Australia versus New Zealand. And these names should be familiar to any of you who've been watching at home. We've had both of these teams on the show before. Unfortunately, we got to watch both of them lose to Argentina. But as we can see, representing in Australia, it's Naviut, Joen, Ender, and Twiz.
And then, of course, from New Zealand, we have Pathra, Ting Tong, Slayer Max, and Flame Lord. Argentina very well positioned in the group. These are 2 of the teams that are very much still fighting for that top 3 position to make it to Stage 2, and this match will decide a lot of that.
Right, so as you pointed, if New Zealand does win out tonight, Australia is eliminated from advancing to Stage 2. New Zealand just has to win this match and then their next match against Russia, and then they actually would win the group. They would be the top play. So seeing here on the screen, beautiful Australia and New Zealand. Cora, I've got a little bit of a quiz here for you.
I do like quizzes.
We're going to play a game called 2 Truths and a Lie.
Okay.
Okay. First statement. The Lord of the Rings series, Hobbiton, was actually shot in New Zealand.
Okay.
Next. Naviut has the sexiest legs in all of Hearthstone.
Naturally.
Australia is governed by 80% giant man-sized spiders.
It's a toughie. I mean, yeah, Naviut, the sexiest legs in Hearthstone. That's a given. I've seen The Lord of the Rings, so I do know that that was shot in New Zealand. So, I mean, maybe it's like 70% giant spiders. I'm going to have to say C.
You're wrong. They're actually all correct. Australia, governed by 80% giant man-sized spiders. So,
Rob, I'm feeling a little debated right now.
You should always be feeling debated when it's 2 Truths and a Lie with Rob. But we see up on the screen the players and the classes they brought. Now, Cora, you've done such a great job up until this point explaining the unique Hearthstone Global Games format. Do it again.
All right. So, teams of 4. Each player gets 2 unique classes, and then it plays out like a best-of-5 blind pick conquest series naturally. What if it goes to game number 5? Then one player who played before will be taking that spot. They have the option of playing either the class that they did not play previously or that 9th class they will then have open.
Right, so if you are the person selected to play in the ace match, it's because the team does trust you. This is certainly done by committee, but ultimately leaving one player at the wheel, the mouse. who does the clicking? Who decides? It's a big mark of trust,
important.
and I'm not sure I usually trust Naviute to make great decisions, but here he is anyway as that ace match player.
He knows how to shop for shorts and anime and how to
Virtual,
turn his stream on.
virtual waifus.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You know. So he's made some tough decisions in his life. I might be okay with him doing the clicking of the mouse.
All right, Ting Tong representing New Zealand in there in that ace match, but we had a chance to catch up with Naviute to talk to him about the Hearthstone Global Games.
Good day, mates. Naviute here, and 2 right, Australia will win the Global Games. The communication aspect of Global Games is definitely the part we've had the most trouble with. Just being on the same page each turn and having each player try and articulate what they want to do on any given turn is proving a struggle. There's a couple Australians thrown in here and there, and maybe that's why our communication's been lacking. Maybe it's your turn, and no one's letting you talk, even though it's your turn. And then you go, "Come on, guys! Like, give me a fair shake of the sauce bottle. Give me a fair go." But I like to think we speak, English. Jowan or Akmaker is probably the one I'm closest with. Known him for quite a long time. He's really good mechanical and also good at theory crafting. His strengths are mainly his rogue and just any combo-based deck. Ender is probably the aggro player on our team. He's definitely played the most, aggro druid, aggro shaman, zoo, warlock, just those sort of decks. He's been a ladder grinder for a long time. Two is probably the newest member. Did pretty well at the Malaysian major. That was the first time I'd met him. He's been pretty good so far. I don't really ever speak too highly of myself, but I like to think I pull my own weight. But yeah, Global Games is the first time all 4 of us have been together. Australia is a really nice place to live. The standard of living is pretty good. It's got good beaches, good infrastructure, besides the internet. The Hearthstone community in Australia, it's almost non-existent. Just being isolated from each other makes it really, really hard in terms of having a tavern hero or just local events. I think that's definitely changing with the way the winter prelims was run in Sydney, the one that I went to. There was a bit of a turnout, which was really, really nice to see. There's a little bit of a rivalry. I mean, yeah, if we lose to New Zealand, then, that's a career ender. So we definitely won't be losing to New Zealand, that's for sure.
Yeah, that rivalry that Naviute mentioned, I was talking to Joan a little bit about it, and he described New Zealand as kind of that awkward cousin you don't want to make eye contact with. So a little bit of bad blood between our two teams, but they're going to have to decide it all in the most important sport in the history of man, Hearthstone. That used to flow off better than the tongue when you would say, Hearthstone, here's a Warcraft and Ashes.
Well, we can't.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore.
All right, well, the picks are in for game number 1. It is going to be Joan taking on Ting Tong, and it looks like, I believe it is going to be both players playing Rogue here, and wouldn't surprise me, Joan and Ting Tong in both of their prior matches both brought Quest Rogue, so these are 2 players who are praised as kind of being Rogue specialists. Joan, I had chance to talk to him last year on the Hearthstone Championship Tour. He enjoys playing Rogue because of all the decision making, right? It's a deck that doesn't necessarily, I mean, obviously it has had aggro builds in the past, but it doesn't usually have that direct of an approach, so he appreciates that. I'm kind of hoping it is not going to be the Quest Rogue mirror. That one is certainly, to be honest, a little unsatisfying to watch, as it's very much, you can kind of tell very early on how those games are going to go. But again, it wouldn't surprise me, as both of these players did bring Quest Rogue last time.
It's definitely possible that it won't be. We saw Miracle Rogue actually have one of the highest win rates at HCT last weekend, in part because Muzzy did, of course, end up winning the tournament undefeated with Miracle Rogue in his lineup. But some other players were having pretty good luck with it as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if either of these players wanted to switch things up a little bit. Australia hasn't been having the best results, so maybe it's in part due to their communication, like Naviute was saying. Maybe part of it is as a result of their lineup. So maybe some Miracle Rogues, but yeah, Quest Rogue, it's hard to deny that it's just a really strong deck.
Right, we did have Amnesiac talking to us, I believe, a couple weeks back, saying there's value in a format like the Hearthstone Global Games format of kind of bringing different things and changing it up, just messing with your opponents a little bit. So wouldn't be too surprised to see that. And coming into this, we've had other teams, other top-tier teams that were supposed to do really well in this event, talk about communication being a big issue. Taiwan specifically brought it up that the losing and the communication issues ended up being what spurred them to try a little bit harder with their deck lists. And get their things together to actually win. So Australia going to need to turn it around tonight, right here, right now, if they want to continue on to stage 2. So very interested to see if their approach differs this week.
Yeah, and I mean, just looking at Australia versus New Zealand as far as player lineups, Australia is the more experienced of the 2 teams. They have players who have HCT experience, whereas New Zealand, is, you know, they have some experience at the Southeast Asian circuit, the Malaysian major, the Thai major, for instance. Obviously, they're all fantastic players. Pathra is a streamer, but not as global experience as Australia does. So looking at just the teams on paper, you would expect Australia to take this one, but New Zealand has the better record, and we're going to be going head-to-head in a Quest Rogue mirror first off. This is very much... not much really happens until you complete the quest, right? So they're both working towards that goal, and it's pretty much the player that gets there fastest has a massive advantage.
Right, and when you're looking at the mulligans, there are certain matchups where you may feel okay trying to get the quest going with Novice Engineer. It's a little bit more expensive, but you're drawing resources. You're building up to having that big board once the quest goes live here. But in general, in this one, from what I understand, and I've played a decent bit of Quest Rogue lately just to kind of get my head a little bit more into this deck, it's all about just getting the quest going. So if that involves playing cheaper minions, you generally just want to do that. You want to get the bounce effects ASAP because he who quests first generally wins in this matchup.
That is beautiful, Rob.
Thank you.
He who quests best wins matchups. I think ideally you would like to complete your quest with, you know, Firefly, Igneous Elemental, just because it is the most generation for post-quest. But if you do have to get it done with, you know, Biofin or Glacial Shard, at least you do have the small upside of those battle cries. And we're seeing Tar Creeper in Jowen's hand, Tar Creeper and Tolvir Stone Shaper becoming more and more popular at the top end of the Quest Rogue decks to give you that little bit of edge in aggressive decks, aggressive mirrors, excuse me. So against Pirate Warrior, against Aggro Druid, you have Glacial Shard already to try and slow down the early game, and then Tar Creeper and Tolvir to give you just that little bit of extra time to be able to complete the quest and swing that turnaround.
Speaking of early game, we see Ting Tong and New Zealand, they have 3 bounce effects. This Bilefin Tideslayer could, or Tidehunter rather, could ultimately be bounced and could complete the quest, but as we see here, this is going to take a fair bit of time. This has to get going. Each bounce effect is going to cost 2 mana, so there's no universe where you can just play down that Bilefin Tidehunter now, because at the moment, it is the minion that is probably looking to get bounced, so for them it's just going to be Dagger Pass. On the other side now, we see 2 copies of Bilefin Tidehunter and a Shadow Step, so Jowen and Ting Tong both... Ting Tong obviously has the technical assets to get it done, but it's going to take him a fair bit of time. Jowen looking to be on a little bit of a faster clock, especially if he can pick up a second Shadow Step, but that is not a second Shadow Step. That Mimic Pod really failing to deliver, at least in this point in the game.
Yeah, Vanish is fantastic in certain matchups. Against Paladin, it can do really great work with an early prep if they have early Murloc aggression, but in the mirror, it's not going to be too fantastic, especially since Jowen doesn't have any way to get the Vanish online earlier. So he was really looking for a cheaper method of completing the quest there, or just more bounce effects, really. So now New Zealand picks up Novice Engineer. That's going to be better to complete the quest with, just because it gives them additional resources, whereas Bilefin Tidehunters 1/1s really don't matter until you've actually completed the quest. If you complete the quest and then bounce Bilefin a couple of times, that's fine. But
it's great against charge minions. It's
yeah,
incredibly powerful. Do want to point out there, if you're a little bit new to Quest Rogue, why choose to use the Gadgets and Ferryman there over the Youthful Brewmaster? Quite simply, it's because it has to be comboed to get the bounce effect. So there was 2 mana, you were going to bounce something, you might as well just go ahead and do it. On Jowen's side, that is a Bilefin Tidehunter down, and it also gets bounced. So both of these teams, there are matchups in this situation where things kind of feel like a blowout because one team gets the bounces, the other team doesn't. But from where each player is sitting, without caster vision, it's like, okay, we're both working on those bounce engines, we're both getting ready to go, because both of these teams realize they have to get the quest going. That's how they're going to win this. And certain matchups in mirrors, you can kind of say, okay, maybe there are auxiliary win conditions, but there just really isn't with this deck.
And namely, both of these teams are bouncing minions that do cost 2 mana that don't generate additional copies of themselves. So the resource generation is limited, meaning that you need to have 3 bounce effects or 2 copies of the minions in hand, and there's no way to cheat the mana curve. There's no preparation in either of these hands, so the Crystal Core at this point would have to be played for the full 5 mana. One of the ways that the Quest Rogue can really just overwhelm the board and win the game in a single turn is to get all of the cheap minions in hand ready, so, you know, flame elementals namely, be able to play all of your elementals and then prep the quest. So then you have a very large board when your opponent has nothing at that point, but neither of these teams have those additional resources or the cheat the mana curve effect.
Nothing just yet there. We see Jowen continuing to bounce that Bilefin Tidehunter. Now, Joen has seen already. Yeah, I was going to say, the fact that this Novice Engineer has been bounced multiple times, so he's not even going to actually bother bouncing the Bilefin Tidehunter. He's just going wide on the board now. He's going to Shadow Step it, but I was going to say, there is potentially merit to just going wide on the board because you know what your opponent is doing there. But going ahead and getting the bounce, and he does, at the moment, have the bigger board. It's just, in general with this matchup, the bigger board pre-quest is usually not all that relevant.
Well, Joen is looking to complete the quest next turn and actually be able to play the Crystal Core on that turn as well. So holding Bilefin in hand means that you're protecting yourself against the off chance that New Zealand has a Fan of Knives tucked into their deck. Then you can play down Bilefin and complete quest, get the 2 guaranteed 5/5s going into the next turn.
New Zealand has a lot in hand here, and they are going to be able to go ahead and bounce this Novice Engineer. They won't have enough mana to play the second, or the Novice Engineer a second time, but can go ahead and just start looking to clean up the board just a little bit here. Don't want to leave that wide board when the opponent looks like your opponent is fairly close to actually completing that quest.
So most that Ting Tong can do is clear off 3 minions, and now Joen will just be able to play the Bilefin Tidehunter. Can even prep the quest and play the Tar Creeper as well. So this is going to be a very large board state for Australia that New Zealand cannot remove and doesn't look like they can really race at this point. Their bounce effects were just a little bit too slow with the Novice Engineer.
I want to say, actually, I may be wrong here, but I think Australia has actually only bounced the Bilefin Tidehunter. This will be the 3rd time they would play it, so I think they'd actually have to vanish it out again.
Or were they only on 2?
Going. I was going to say, I'm pretty sure.
Ting Tong is on 3. No, it was 3.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so there it is. So yeah, to your point, you're going to be able to go ahead and just prep out that quest and get going there. And
you could just play it, I suppose. You don't really need the Tar Creeper on board. Prep Vanish might be more valuable.
Sure.
If you do have Chargers, you can then finish the game with those because you've used most of your bounce effects by now. Gadgets in, Ferryman, you used a Shadow Step.
Right, so they certainly had options on that turn. Going to go ahead and choose to value the Vanish with the discount more than playing the Tar Creeper on that turn. Okay, there's a Vanish for Ting Tong. Now, nothing on the board has charge, so that is one of the upsides if he chooses to Vanish. Now,
yeah,
not going to, probably. But if he chose to go ahead and just use the Vanish this turn, at least everything that would come down would have to be replayed again and wait a turn to attack because none of it has charge. And that's sometimes a big factor in this matchup because even if you were to sap or Vanish things back into the hand, a lot of the minions in this deck have charge, so oftentimes the effect is kind of diminished.
At most, Vanish here would be like, you know, Frost Nova, for instance. It would be delaying the damage for 1 turn, but Joen would be able to play this many minions down next turn, likely plus additional minions he has in hand. So Ting Tong opts to just complete the quest this turn, try to stave off as much damage as possible with the Tar Creeper, and just hope that Joen doesn't have charge damage in hand to finish this off. So it does look like he will have 5, 10, 15, 25, 26 with the dagger because you can play the boar, prep Vanish, play the boar again. So just a few points off of actually finishing up the game this turn. Going to elect to just keep the strongest board state. Obviously, you don't want to Vanish when you have minions that your opponent simply can't remove. And this is just setting up 2-turn lethal either way.
The nature of the matchup, you know, Joen got the quest going first. He had the minions on the board, and Ting Tong not having that prep for that Vanish to make it cheaper. And oof. This is going to be an early first blood, I believe, for the Australia-New Zealand Bowl.
The Fighting Kangaroos.
Yeah.
Got 1 on the board. Yeah, it's just a bit of a rough start for Ting Tong. It wasn't ideal hands for either of these rogues. You would like to be bouncing, you know, Glacial Shards or ideally Fireflies, Flame Elementals, just because it's, you know, 1 mana versus 2 mana makes a very big difference. So it was a bit of a slow start for both guys, but ultimately Joen choosing to bounce the Bilefin Tidehunters meant that once the quest was completed, he had more on the board, and he simply had that Shadow Step as well, which allowed him to bounce the Bilefin for free, get down the Bilefin with the quest in the same turn. Just ultimately more gas, was able to finish it faster, blow out that game. It's going to be game 1 to Australia.
I like seeing the respect between the two opponents. They're both well played. They're both rogue players.
Yeah.
They understand how that matchup goes. You know, there are certain matches in Hearthstone that take, you know, upwards of 30 minutes, and you're sitting there, and it's back and forth and very emotionally draining and exhausting. That's kind of those matchups where you just walk in, it's like, hey, what are your cards? And it's like, well, 2 kings. And
it's like, look at these mulligans. All right, you got it.
Yeah, so that navigated very well by Joen. Joen, you know, as Navi had said, rogue specialist. That's what he does, and just kind of ended up going his way. This is now on target, since we only have one series tonight, if all the matches go this quickly, to be the shortest
broadcast. We're going to be done in like 40
40
minutes, dude. We're going to get dinner at dinner time.
That is going to be kind of ridiculous. But that is first point going in the favor of Australia. So, again, they have to win this series if they want to continue to have a chance for Stage 2. And they actually play, I believe, on June 6th. They're going to have to run into Austria. So they'll have to beat Austria as well. There's so many interesting implications for Group C in terms of Austria could make it through, New Zealand could make it through, Australia could make it through, even Russia, I believe. As I was looking at this, there's one scenario where they're not totally 100% safe, so don't want to get too far into the weeds on that one, but that group is just wide open.
Yeah, sitting at 3-1, it's very likely that Russia will make it through, but on the off chance that, you know, for instance, New Zealand does beat Austria and then beat...
They have to beat Australia and then Russia.
Oh, yes, Australia and then Russia. Then if Russia loses and then somebody else wins, then yes, there is a chance that Russia is not safe, but it is a very outside chance. So here we have game number 2. It's going to be Ender and Pathra. Pathra, obviously, a great streamer and player. She's been playing a lot of Shaman and Hunter lately, and I think she does have the Hunter class represented today.
Right, she actually has 4 top 200 finishes on ranked play. So, you know, she does stream, but she's also a very high caliber player. Generally, instead of doing a lot of the innovating and deck building, she's more content to kind of see how things shake out and play the strongest decks as built by other players. But I got to give a call out in talking to her. She really has done a great job managing the New Zealand team. She's very much kind of running the show in terms of, okay, team, here's what we're doing. These are the decks we're all playing. Who wants to play what? So shout out to her. Ender. This is interesting to me. Ender's on Paladin. Ender's Paladin list, the hyper-aggressive Murloc Paladin with Grimscale Chum, Grimscale Oracle, designed to just beat up mages, as mages kind of rose in popularity on the ladder. This deck he built, I believe, was a top 10 finish this past month, or just recently. So I'm curious to see if that factors in, if that's going to be the Paladin deck he's playing, or if it's going to be something a little bit more kind of accepted as normal, which is, you know, you have the early game Murloc package, but the deck actually tails out around Ragnaros Lightlord, Tyrion Fordring, Sunkeeper Tarim, Spikeridge Steed, all those amazingly powerful late game effects. And that's kind of the difference in if Ender was going to an HCT event on his own versus playing in a team format is, what does that deck look like? Yeah, you built something cool, but maybe the team wants something different.
Normal is so relative for Paladin nowadays, though. Paladin has been, you know, represented all across the board the last 2 weeks in HCT events. We saw a lot of the aggressive mid-range Murloc Paladin in Europe, and then last week was complete hyper-control Paladin, topping out at Primordial Drake. So not much of a finisher for those Paladins, except that they just don't let aggressive decks kill them. So it does look like we're going to be seeing the more aggressive Murloc version, very much up Ender's alley here. And then Pathra on the Hunter build, which Hunter's pretty standardized. You get mid-range Hunter, and that's about all there is. You can, you know, vary your tech cards a little bit. Do you want Hungry Crabs? Do you want Galaka Crawlers? Do you want Tundra Rhinos? But there's only so much that you can really do with this style of Hunter deck.
Right, so you see that Rallying Blade. And if you haven't seen this deck before, you may be thinking, okay, why Rallying Blade? And the short answer is it comes out a turn sooner and deals with some of the most prevalent threats you're going to see in ranked play. You know, for example, Vicious Fledgling is a druid, a card we see a lot in aggro druid that sometimes just wins games.
Cold-blooded killer.
All on its own. It is just a disgustingly powerful minion. Rallying Blade deals with that. You don't have to worry about, oh, do I have the coin for the True Silver Champion? It just deals with a lot of the more aggressive threats early. You're not even really playing it for the battle cry. You're just playing it because it's a 3-mana, 3/2 weapon.
I mean, if you have Steward of Darkshire in your deck, occasionally you can get +1/+1 off the blade, but you're like, oh, that's neat. You really want it in the mirror. It's absolutely fantastic. Can take out Murloc War Leaders, can take out Rockpool Hunters. So just a really great, and this is saying, you know, how fantastic Fiery War Axe is. We're willing to play Rallying Blade and Eaglehorn Bow when their battle cries do not matter.
You're preaching to the choir. I was for the longest time on that train of when I was playing aggro decks more routinely, I was like, we got to get rid of Fiery War Axe. That's the real problem card. Hall of Fame, that bad boy. But looking at Ender's opening hand, does have the ability to just go for that Tidecaller Inquisitor play if he wants to, just load up the board with power. Would be forced to use the coin and doesn't have a natural turn 2 play, so it may be a consideration. In this matchup, it is really important for the the Paladin to stay ahead of the Hunter, because once the Hunter gets the board and you start playing from behind with Consecration, generally, if the Hunter has that good curve, they can outpower you with that 5-drop Tundra Rhino, go into the Savannah Highmane, and the more aggressive Paladin decks are usually not running Elder Peacekeeper, so they don't have a fantastic answer to cards like Highmane.
And part of the reason Ender probably electing not to play Murloc Tidecaller on turn 1 is that one of the Hunter's big curves is Firefly into Direwolf Alpha.
Right.
So that would challenge the Murloc Tidecaller directly. The Vilefin wouldn't be able to take out the Direwolf, and then you would have likely used your coin because you want to get this Vilefin online as soon as possible. Having the Murlocs instead of the Silverhand Recruits means that your Gentle Megasaur is that much stronger, means that your Murloc War Leader is that much stronger. So it's very important to have that online as quickly as possible.
Right, certainly gives you that flexibility. Now, Hunter, more than any other deck, can kind of afford to flex in these tech cards you were talking earlier, the Hungry Crab, the Galaka Crawler, because, hey, they're beasts. There's obvious synergy with Crackling Razor Maw, with Houndmaster, so even if they whiff on the intended target of the Crab or the Pirate, or the Murloc or the Pirate, they're still getting value a lot of the time, so Path are just going to go ahead and decide, like, okay, what's the #1 rule of playing Hunter right now? We stick to our curve, we play things down, whatever the strongest thing we have available to us, and just go from there. Don't overthink it too much.
And with the attack in from the Firefly, Ender does now have the option to play the Rallying Bait and fully clear off the board. Playing around Crackling Razormaw in hand, really hedging his bets against Animal Companion into Houndmaster. Shenanigans for the Hunter, and
we see it. There's that Razormaw.
The Hunter curve has not been too kind thus far to Pathra. It's been a little bit inefficient. Obviously, on turn 2, you would have liked to have that Razormaw. Obviously, it wouldn't actually have buffed the Firefly, but still, the Galaka Crawler, not the strongest turn 2 play, especially into Murlocs that have 3 health.
Okay, so when you're looking for the adaptations there, I would not have minded seeing something, the ability to make the 1/1 plants that die after or appear after the minion dies. Yeah, living spores. Because board control is so important in this matchup, but the health is not bad at all. The Rallying Blade only does 3 damage. You're looking at a minion down that does 1 damage, so the health could make the board a little heavier and a little more awkward to deal with, and that's really what Pather and New Zealand want to be doing here. Yes, they have Deadly Shot, they have Unleash the Hounds. Those are catch-up mechanics that can be very powerful, but the rest of the hand is just a Flame Elemental, and Ender knows that much. That at least one of those cards in hand is a Flame Elemental.
Yeah, and you can kind of start to assume that maybe there's no natural 3-drop in hand for Pathra, so he can start to piece together exactly what she's got. There wasn't a super strong 2-drop. There was no really strong 3-drop. And you would like to challenge the Paladin's Murloc board a little bit stronger, I would think. Murloc War Leader could come out here, and then you would have no real way of actually killing it off because it would buff the Vilefin Inquisitor. The blade goes into the Razor Maw. You're staring down a bit of a tough time. Unleash the Hounds is a great catch-up mechanic, but it can only do so much when you don't have, you know, Knife Juggler behind it. It's more useful for damage instead of cleaning up boards with minions that generally have high health, like Murlocs.
Well, Ender goes ahead and says, "Get out of my jungle." I feel like those are the words we all hear at least 7 times.
I dream about them.
Ranked play game. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and see a little bit of board cleaning up. Go ahead and play the Stonehill Defender. The other option was the Murloc Tidecaller into the hero power. Just go ahead and buff up the Tidecaller a little bit, play another minion onto the board from the hero power. But yeah, Hungry Crab showing up a little bit late to the party, but the upside is, for the kind of deck Ender is playing, Hungry Crab is probably going to get value in this matchup, so Pather can't be too disappointed to see this. And now it is a battle of 1/4s, just sitting on the board staring at each other.
You would like to be able to develop a stronger board state this turn. Houndmaster would have been fantastic. Even a second copy of Crackling Razormaw or Animal Companion here would be really good. It's just awkward because you know that the Paladin on turn 4 has an abundance of things that they can play. And you cannot play this crab until a Murloc comes down. Deadly Shotting a 1/4.
This feels awful.
Is it really worth it? I don't personally think so. Deadly Shot's not going to be very strong in the late game because the Paladin can, you know, obviously hero power consistently. That cuts down on the effectiveness of Deadly Shot. But what are you worried about with this 1/4 here?
I don't think it's a matter of worry. I think she just wants to get things pushing, and Pather having a very visceral reaction to using that Deadly Shot.
Feels so bad.
It's not why it's in the deck. The Deadly Shot is there to deal with, okay, you've been pushing the aggression, you're about ready to just put the final moves on a match, and then a Tyrion comes down. It's the only thing on the board. That's where Deadly Shot's coming out and shining. And in this particular situation, you do it because you feel like you have to start getting pressure down, and it lined up with the mana curve of destroy the taunt, play the 1-drop in your hand, and you don't want to use the Hungry Crab. Unleash the Hounds did nothing. Basically, her options there were what she did or Flame Elemental Hero Power. And I'm not necessarily sure that Flame Elemental Hero Power would have been that terrible. You get a little more time to think about what decision you need to make, what are you reacting around. But yeah, it was a decision Pathra and New Zealand felt they had to make. Now, Kindly Grandmother, certainly not a bad pickup here. Obviously, a little more powerful early in the game, but you are getting something that sticks, has to be dealt with before the Kindly Grandmother comes out, or sorry, the Big Bad Wolf comes out and squeezes another hero power, which is extremely relevant against more aggressive Paladin decks.
Weaving in the hero powers is one of the biggest strengths of Hunter, but its biggest weakness on the contrary is that it does rely so heavily on curving out well.
Is that its biggest weakness, not taunt and heals?
You know, there's a lot of cheaters in Hearthstone that play the taunts and the heals, and you know, he doesn't like those either. But if you don't hit your 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s,
right,
you're going to struggle very significantly, because then you're going to be drawing into the 1-drops that you didn't have, or the 2-drops that you didn't have instead of Savannah Highmane, which is your only big payoff card in the late game. So the real strength of Beasts is the ability to synergize. And when you don't hit those synergies on curve, you don't have a lot that you can really do as Hunter. You're not a fancy class. You're not, you know, playing Kazakus. You're hitting face for 2 every turn and playing some Beasts.
Pather has a chance here to go ahead, get rid of the Murloc. Could play the Unleash the Hounds beforehand just to get the extra Hound, but this is, as you pointed out, kind of a keen example of why Hunter right now, yes, in the beginning of Journey to Un'Goro, Hunter was looked at as, okay, Hunter went from being basically unplayable to, okay, we have some new tools, we're able to push the aggression a little bit, the mid-range build is kind of back. But yeah, it is, I think as the meta is becoming more crystallized, I think it's actually kind of going down in overall power and starting to get a seat much closer to Gul'dan. We might even see Rexxar start showing up in those Mulligans commercials because Uther's so busy.
He's got a lot of free time.
I mean, to Gul'dan's credit, great actor. I did enjoy this week's.
He does a great job. I think there are a couple Hunters in HCT this weekend. We saw a few the last couple of weekends. They performed okay. The nature of Hunter is that they don't do anything crazy. Their results haven't been fantastic, but there are, you know, some diehard Hunter players who think that the deck is reasonably well positioned right now and people just aren't taking advantage of it. So I don't think we'll ever see people stop trying to play Hunter, but Uther has been the real story of Un'Goro thus far, I think. Rexxar still just hanging out in the shadows.
All right, well, we see the Rat Pack come down, and Pathra is at least presenting something of a board, but there are just so many resources in Enter's hand. And I want to point out, before we got into this match, I asked, would Ender be bringing that deck that, you know, he got a high legend finish with, and he decided to go ahead and call audible. He's not. He's saying, okay, this is probably what people expect. Naviu called me the aggro player. This is probably what people think of me. I'm not going to bring it, though. I'm going to go ahead and bring what is really just that traditional mid-range style right now. You have the early game Murloc package, but you also have a lot of the very powerful late game tools. We see that Primordial Drake. Wouldn't be a stretch to assume Curator's milling around in here somewhere. So I like the call from Ender, and we've talked before about the value of doing something like this, just shaking it up, not letting your opponents get a good read on you.
This deck has so much stability. You have the aggressive early game, and then you're able to curve out so well with Curator, with Tyrion, Rag Lightlord you see occasionally. So Pathra here does have a huge hit, very well rewarded for holding on to that Hungry Crab. And now the Hunter from this point, if Pathra can pick up Savannah Highmane, Tundra Rhino, even Houndmaster, she will be able to continue pushing this board presence quite significantly because those death rattles are very difficult for the Paladin to actually clear off of the board. So Pathra does have some momentum now, but these next few draws really need to continue to push that momentum, or the Paladin will just win on the back of resources.
The last few draws she's had, unfortunately, have not really gone the distance. They've been a little bit smaller. She's drawing her Kindly Grandmothers really at a point where she doesn't need them. And in the early game, she had Unleash the Hounds and Deadly Shot. And this, again, speaks to one of the issues of the deck right now. It doesn't have all those fancy bells and whistles. And the catch-up mechanics are there, but if you get them at the wrong time, they're very low power. We saw a Deadly Shot on a Stonehill defender. We saw the Unleash the Hounds early are used to very little effect. So this is certainly favored towards the Paladin as this goes later. And yeah, you're weaving in the hero powers, but the, you know, they've been healing already with the Wicker Flame Burn Bristles, so it's not like they've... 25. This is just not what the Hunter wants to see.
Yeah, you would have liked to have put on more pressure early on. Australia electing to get some Megasword value instead of simply playing the Curator or going for a Consecration play. Regardless of what they were to do with the Consecration, something was going to be left behind, whether it be a 3-2 Crab or a couple of 1-1s from the Rat Pack. So might as well try to fight the board with the board and then use your removal as a backup. You have Primordial Drake next turn, which you're likely going to play anyway, so it might just make more sense to challenge board initially and then clean up with one of the best cards coming out of Journey to Unworld.
Now those Murlocs have Spores. In case you didn't think you were going to get the board back before.
You used one Unleash the Hounds. This is really an occasion where you would have loved to have the second one. I think Savannah Highmane is still a much better draw, but now you would really relish an Unleash the Hounds off the top. Would that even be enough? I don't know. You can trade Megasaur into Highmane.
They can full clear the board here. This is just actually, once the board gets cleared here, if Ender chooses to do that, the Hunter probably never gets back on the board, and you're actually just putting down the little 1-1s. You are just setting up going wide again. So Megasaur into the Highmane. You can put the Stegodon into the Rat Pack, put the 1-1 into the Kindly Grandmother. Go ahead and just blow up that board with the Consecration. Or if you feel like it's the Primordial Drake, I feel like the Primordial Drake actually does a little more harm to your own board than maybe you want to do. But if you just want to have a giant 4-8 taunt that's basically saying you're never getting through this, you could just go ahead and Primordial Drake.
Depends. If you Consecration, you can get away Kodo and Hero Power on the back foot, and your board certainly would be stronger as far as resiliency than it would be if you played the Primordial Drake. Okay. But even still, you're left with... Yeah, you're fine. You may not have any death rattles anymore, but you've got a large taunt, and you've seen one Unleash the Hounds already, so you're not worrying about anything. The Hunter does not play well from being behind.
Yeah, Pathra can go ahead and equip the bow and play some Skyrim, hunt some dragons, but that's pretty much what she has an option to do, because the rest of this is just, there's no card draw realistically. Even back in the day, Hunter had Quick Shot, right? Yeah. There's nothing in there to draw cards.
You always had the Quick Shot, Kill Command dream, the Quick Shot, Kill Command dream. But that dream is dead, and unfortunately so is the Hunter. Australia going to go up to a quick 2-0.
Right.
I do think there's potential for Hunter. I think that it does have decent matchups across the board, but when you draw that poorly, there's just really not much that you can do.
That's kind of my complaint with the deck right now, is if you want to play aggressive decks, there are decks that are, I think, a little more forgiving on the draw, that also kind of have that long-term plan with certainly very powerful endgame cards. So it's really something Hunter doesn't have. So for my money, as someone who is a storied Hunter fan, I do think that Hunter's value kind of continues to diminish a little bit every week. But speaking of dreams, Australia now on that 2-0 dream, and we're on that 25-minute broadcast dream. This one's wrapping up quickly here. Australia just needs one more win.
Here and casting some Hearthstone, getting done a little bit earlier today. Obviously, we only have one match. Maybe you're happy about that. You get to go home and hang out with the dog. But
dogs are great.
New Zealand wouldn't be too happy if this one wrapped up very quickly, and neither would my Kiwi friend, as I've elected to be on the New Zealand side of the desk.
Oh, is that how it works? So I just defaulted to...
So far, we are not doing too hot.
We got this.
You got, Mama Roo.
Oh, that's a little baby. I didn't... It's actually like
Congratulations, Rob. You're a mother.
Finally. Roberta's a mom. All right,
we knew
so
this day would come.
one more win needed for Australia to go through this. Now, if Australia wins out here, they have to play Austria as their final matchup. So still work they have to do, but this buys them daylight.
It does.
Now,
it is the light at the end of the very long tunnel.
Now, if Australia wins this, but they lose to Austria, Austria's in a great position. So, Austria's sitting back. It's probably way past their bedtime, but they're watching. They're thinking, okay, come on, Australia, just win. Just beat New Zealand. New Zealand has already beaten Austria, so Austria does not want to see New Zealand win.
Wife coach is hanging out with life coach. He's playing some other card games. She's just watching and hoping that Australia takes this one. But it's going to be tough for New Zealand to come back.
Well, I think in a format like this, obviously because it's a 9-deck format and you have to bring all the classes, it's certainly a little more forgiving than maybe some of the, like last Hero Stand. Well, not even, I guess more Conquest would be. Conquest is not super forgiving generally if you fall down the 2-0 because that last deck in the 5-deck thing is usually not super favored for you, the way it kind of naturally pans out. But this format has thus far proven to be very forgiving. We have seen people come down from 0-2, so still opportunity for New Zealand to do it. They just... Again, that first match in the Quest Rogue, it's hard to really hold that one against them.
Yeah, there wasn't too much that they could have done in either of those matches, to be perfectly honest. And here we're going to see game number 3 is going to be Twiz on the Mage versus Flamelord on the Warrior. Warrior very well defined right now. You have aggressive and you have control. And then Mage... Similarly, you have aggressive and you have control. You've got the Secret Mage variant, and then you've got the Gunther Discover Mage. Both have been performing quite well in competitive play, and obviously Warrior, take your pick. What are you better with? What do you prefer playing? What do you think your opponent may bring that a certain type of Warrior could give you a little bit of an edge against? But we've seen almost equal amounts of each of the archetypes.
I feel like Mage just churns out like a tier 1 deck every week. They're like, no, it's Secret Mage. No, it's Discover Mage. Like, we're just going to soon have like...
Freeze Mage.
It's going to be like pure burn, like old LBYS style, like Frost Nova, Leper Gnome, Mana Worm. Like, Mage is just in such a good spot, and it really comes down to, I got to shine a light, Primordial Glyph. This is a card that is so incredibly powerful and so incredibly frustrating to deal with because of the flexibility it affords, not even in terms of just discovering, but the way you have to play around discounted mana costs on turns after the glyph is played. So I gotta say, if you're looking at Mage and you're thinking, well, what changed?
Primordial Glyph changed. Primordial Glyph is... Whew.
All right, well,
it's tough to play against, it's tough to play with, and we're probably going to be seeing some here from Twiz and Flamelord on a Pirate Warrior variant. We've been seeing Spellbreaker here and there. Firefly, that's a bit new for me to see.
So it's actually was an inclusion, the cut to Mortal Strike and the inclusion of Spellbreaker, and then the addition of Firefly because it fights for board early. So it's basically a respect nod to other aggro decks. I've been seeing a little bit more at the very highest of Legend Ladder, so it is a thing that's out there, and some people are starting to pick up on it. But yeah, it's going to be great. Well, I don't know necessarily great against the hand that the Mage has, but it is going to be more powerful than other options might be. And Mortal Strike and Aggro Mirrors is just abysmal. You just generally don't get much use out of it at all because you're playing it. It's usually taking up a whole 4-mana turn or pretty much all of a 5-mana turn as well because you have nothing else to fit in with it. So I definitely like the inclusion of Firefly, and Spellbreaker over Mortal Strike a lot of times just accomplishes the same thing. Gets you through a taunt, is another big body on the board that Mortal Strike obviously doesn't provide, but Australia just needs to win this last match to win the series, and they have a pretty vicious opening hand.
The most important mulligan for New Zealand in this matchup is Fiery War Axe. They have found it. That means they get to cut down early Mana Worm, early Arcanologist, early Sorcerer's Apprentice, if Australia has it. And yes, Australia's hand is very good as well, but if they have to take an entire turn to play Arcane Intellect to try to draw into more removal, then that gives the Pirate Warrior that turn 3 to be able to really push initiative. So you develop War Axe on 1, you get down like Firefly and Dread Corsair on 2, or upgrade Firefly and Dread Corsair, and the Warriors looking like they have a lot of initiative here in this matchup.
Piracy comes at you fast. They're not taking turns to draw cards. No, I'm not drawing cards. I'm just hitting people in the face. I'm clearing minions and going. So it's exactly what we're going to see here. And again, as much as the Aggro Mage there had the early initiative, the early Mana Worm, as you said, it exactly goes to check to Fiery War Axe. Fiery War Axe is the rock on which all aggro minions break themselves.
Yes. I mean, we just saw Paladin playing a 3-mana 3/2 weapon. Warrior, we can play our 3/2 weapons with a coin on turn 1.
Never accept imitations. Always choose the original. You know what it says on Fiery War Axe for a battle cry?
What does it say?
Kill a mana worm.
Does it seriously?
No, it doesn't. You can actually...
I would honestly, I would believe it.
Sure. I mean, it kills Arcanologists too, so Flame Lord has the option there. Has the second Fiery War Axe off the top of the deck, so the decision here, do you want to upgrade this first one, get more value out of it, or do you want to just go ahead and save the upgrade for the second Fiery War Axe? And Patches comes flying out of a cannon, Salcy deckhands there too. It's just a party on the board, and Twiz is not invited.
The pirate party in Australia is going to have to stay in their own country because they're not coming to it.
Twiz is just checking his Facebook invites. He's like, where can I come?
The event was tonight? I thought it was next week.
No,
he told me the wrong address. He's
officially gone. I like this from New Zealand. Getting rid of the Fiery War Axe now, Australia might think, okay, you know, I did my time. I dealt with the Fiery War Axe. Like, I'm safe to go ahead and put things on the board. I can start trying to get back onto this. Gonna get the bad news probably on the next turn that there's just a second Fiery War Axe. And from there, Flame Lord is in a very strong position. Yes, hero power from the mage, generally good at pinging off 1 health minions, but that takes tempo, that takes time, and doesn't look like Flame Lord's going to give it to him.
When you're playing 2 minions per turn and your opponent can only clear 1 minion per turn with their hero power, naturally you are going to be ahead in that situation. Another upgrade picked up for Flame Lord. No minion development aside from the Firefly. That's going to hurt just a little bit. You would at this point like to have South Sea Captain or Kor'kron Elite online for next turn, or Frothing Berserker even.
Yeah, but how do you feel about a 5/4 Fiery War Axe?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. You can only get it up to 4/3 this turn, but yeah, I'm okay with dealing 8 damage to my opponent when all they did last turn was hero power down my 2/1.
I mean, in every single universe, I'm excited about the prospect long-term of that many swings from a Fiery War Axe just going, because you're not really expecting much in the way of taunt. You're not really seeing mirror images run anymore. Obviously, mirror images was more popular in some of the kind of old-school tempo mage style decks, but it hasn't really made its way into the list just yet. So Fiery War Axe, Firefly, gonna go ahead and just be the play here, and let's just get them. You don't even have to think about trading. There's no minions on your opponent's board.
Mirror image would be so good. Yeah, naturally better when you have a Flame Waker behind it, but even still shut down a couple of weapon swings from your opponent. All right, there's the real wacky activator for Mage. What you thought could not be done can, in fact, be done with Primordial Glyph. What are you shooting for here, though? You need to clear this board somehow. You already have Frostbolt, you have hero power, so you could just take this turn strictly for clear, and then Glyph away next turn.
Nope, just going to go ahead and Frostbolt ping. I mean, you just got to get minions off the board. The one thing you are noticing, as much as Flame Lord had the fortuitous start with the axe and then the second axe, that means it's minions he can't draw, and you didn't see a Frothing Berserker on that turn. Yeah, maybe it didn't come down because there was no minions on the board to trade into, so you're not getting value, but you can go ahead and just keep clearing out the minions and basically say, okay, if you don't have any more minions, you're going to have to kill me with this axe. And I do have maybe Frostbolts that can slow you down. Maybe the Glyph gives me something that, maybe an Ice Barrier, an Ice Block, something that keeps me alive. Could find a mirror images. Could just find something to buy him time.
Yeah.
So I like that from Australia. Just go ahead, clear the minions, get that pressure that you can deal with off the board. Because, look, you develop Sorcerer's Apprentice, that's dead. What are you going to get off Glyph that you can use on that turn? Volcanic Potion actually wouldn't have gotten much. Would have cleared 2 of the minions off, but then the Corsair is still alive. You didn't have the mana to ping, so I definitely don't mind what we're seeing from Australia, but now, you know, the upgrades have come out. It's time to stop being cute. That Glyph is going to have to deliver.
And over the course of 2 turns, Flame Lord does have 14 damage represented just with the weapon swings and 2 attacks from each of these small minions on board. So the onus is on Australia to stop this aggression somehow. Ice Block would give them another turn, would discount the Cabal Crystal Runner, but Frostbolt could also accomplish the give them another turn goal by choosing to freeze Flame Lord's face for a single turn.
Right. One interesting point is if you take the Frostbolt, no, Sorcerer's Apprentice, so they actually are both free. I was going to say then you could play the counterspell as well, but yeah, you can actually just play both, so Ice Block, very powerful. I kind of wonder there if you actually would have just preferred Ice Barrier for what it would have given you, just the extra 8 health. Because again, the Pirate Warrior generally will pop the block and then they'll have things that go fast. They have more weapons, they have charge, so you're buying yourself 1 turn, whereas Ice Barrier could potentially be multiple turns. But look, Ice Block is something that is basically what you want to see off the Glyph.
better than nothing, that's for sure. At least it gives them that little bit more time, and it does discount the Cabal Crystal Runner by an additional 2. So a 2-mana 5/5 will challenge everything that Flame Lord can put out on the board. And importantly, that N'Zoth's First Mate, that's a dead draw. You can't play that if you want to get the next 2 swings from your War Axe out. So Flame Lord is essentially playing off of the top of his deck right now, which still is going to be enough to kill Australia if they don't find some way to fight back, but is that little bit of reprieve, that little bit of wiggle room that combined with the Ice Block pickup may give them enough time to be able to stabilize.
I'm gonna pull out my phone and look up this matchup, but I think I know the answer.
You try to give them as much opportunity as you can, the benefit of the doubt, but it is just tough when Pirate Warrior's hitting you in the face.
And your secrets are designed for disruption, right? You have the counter spell, you have the mirror entity. There are situations where these are amazing secrets. You're like, they're doing things, this is great. This isn't really the matchup where you're gonna really get a lot from mirror entity or the counter spell. You're also not gonna get a lot from your Firelands portal, apparently. Would have liked to see something big with Taunt, say an Earth Elemental. Earth Elemental would have been great.
Earth Elemental, Direhorn Hatchling.
Sure.
The Crazed Worshipper, 5-mana 3/6 Taunt, Fen Creeper. There were a lot of 5-mana minions that could have given you a smile on your face instead of the rather frustrated look that Twiz has right now. But I can certainly relate to the way that this match has gone for the Mage.
Are you often disappointed by Pirates?
I am so frequently disappointed when I'm playing Pirates, when I'm playing against Pirates.
When you're seeing a Pirates movie?
The most recent one, yeah. I heard it was pretty disappointing, but I mean, we gotta keep Johnny Depp wealthy somehow.
All right, so obviously New Zealand can go on ahead and pop this block. They can also get rid of the Sorcerer's Apprentice just to play around the potential for Arcane Intellect into Primordial Glyph, which is causing you more problems. So I like that with pop the block, and then you can go ahead and develop the N'Zoth's First Mate just to make sure you have some degree of consistent damage going. But gonna have to find a little bit more damage to actually get through after the block has been popped.
Yeah, one important thing to note is that the block will be popped at 2 if New Zealand wants to expend both the Flame Elemental attack and the weapon attack.
Sure.
If they want to put the Flame Elemental into the Sorcerer's Apprentice and pop the block, it'll be popped at 3. So in that case, South Sea Deckhand plus the N'Zoth's First Mate would be lethal, but they have the counter spell up, so Heroic Strike would not be. Mortal Strike would not be. You would need a charger or an additional weapon that deals at least, well, 2 damage now in this case.
Sure, yeah, I'm buying when you explain it like that. I definitely think setting him to 2 is more important than getting rid of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. And I want to say this particular deck does not run Mortal Strike because we've seen the Spellbreaker and the Fire Elemental there. Or sorry, the Firefly.
Well, you know, how much difference does 1 point of health make here? Deckhand wouldn't be lethal unless you have a weapon equipped anyway. Just the N'Zoth's First Mate weapon here would not do it if you're on 2 versus if you're on 3. Kor'kron Elite would do it regardless. Arcanite Reaper would do it regardless. The spells wouldn't do it anyway because of Counterspell. I don't know that there was that big of a difference between 2 and 3. If you run the Flame Elemental into the Sorcerer's Apprentice, then the Sorcerer's Apprentice doesn't naturally trade into your South Sea Captain. Maybe you're more likely to have a weapon stick in that case. That's a tough call.
There's a lot of math that goes on at this point if you're the Mage player. You're thinking of all these different situations. Meanwhile, you know, New Zealand, they're like, gosh, you know, a Kor'kron Elite would just be great.
I'd just like to hit you in the face for 4. Well, there's another Primordial Glyph. What is Australia going to get this time? Ice Block last time was pretty good. Freezing Potion, you can freeze face. If you can also clear the board fully this turn, then you're looking at least 1 more turn if Kor'kron's not picked off the top. Gonna go with Mana Bind just to make this Cabal Crystal Runner free.
I'm late. I'm late.
I mean, freezing the face for 1 turn has obvious appeal because you're looking at potentially dying just to over 2 turns to that Rusty Hook, but I don't hate this for putting the Cabal Crystal Runner down because one thing people tend to, well, there's game anyway, but one thing people tend to forget is
put him at 2.
You have to ultimately kill your opponent too. It's not just like you're going to outlast them, and Pirate Warrior just churns out more and more damage. So now New Zealand having to play around the possibility that this is a second block, this is a barrier, so there is no universe where they're not going to play the Naga Corsair and just swing, but they at least want to talk it over, like what happens if this is in fact Ice Barrier or Ice Block. And that is going to be a match a game in the favor of New Zealand. So now 2-1, there is some daylight. They only have to win 2 more matches, but still facing down elimination from at least this series.
I did like the line of play there from Australia. At that point, they were so far behind that their only real chance to win may have been to have the counterspell active, play that second Firelands portal, and then hit one of those taunts. If they'd been able to do that, nothing off the top would have been able to go through the taunt, and Heroic Strike, Mortal Strike wouldn't have been active through the taunt if Mortal Strike was even in the deck for New Zealand. So that seemed like the line of play that gave Australia the most outs, even though it was still unlikely. But New Zealand just absolutely blazing through that game with the Pirate Warrior. Not much that the Mage could really do to stave off the aggression, even after Primordial Glyph into Ice Block, and a reasonable early game.
Right, I really like looking at that and kind of saying, okay, well, what actually wins us the game as opposed to what prevents us from dying from an extra turn. So, well navigated, I agree, by Australia. But we're going to be heading into that 4th match, and if you love Naviute, this is going to be a great time to watch Hearthstone, because if Naviute wins here, you get a double-decker. You get a second Naviute game, but he's going to have to take on Slayer Max and potentially Ting Tong for Australia to close out the series.
Are we hoping that Navi loses?
So you can get more Naviute?
If he loses, we get Navi twice.
Well, now
is that too much Navi for the world to handle?
I feel like that's not a question I'm equipped to answer, but I do smell food.
So you're hungry. You're also thirsty.
Sure.
Whether it's for beverage or for Navi, who knows?
No chill. Literally 0 chill, Cora. I have, a healthy respect for him as a competitor. That's all it is. I think he's a good guy.
He's got great taste in television shows and films.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Hey, that poster on the right, great movie.
Is it?
Yes.
What is it?
It's
is that Shawshank
Kimi
Redemption?
no Na wa.
No, it's not Shawshank Redemption.
It's not Shawshank Redemption. That's a great movie, too.
Okay.
No, it's Kimi no Na wa. It's great. Slayer Max also looks like he is jamming to some music.
Yeah.
He's ready to play some Hearthstone. They're coming back into this. New Zealand got their first game on the board. 2 more. Easy peasy. Dunzo.
I mean, it's not probably going to be that easy, but we're going to see Druid versus Paladin. So Navi going to be on the Druid, and Druid right now is kind of in this weird state where, at least on ladder, as one Druid deck becomes more popular, the other also becomes more popular. We saw as a reaction to all the aggro Druid, which, taking a moment, I'm not even sure we can call it aggro Druid anymore. I think it's just a mid-range Druid, which it has that early start. It has Genzo. It has double Bittertide Hydra. It has the Living Man. I'm just saying, that is not a pure aggro deck.
Rob. It's a pretty aggressive deck.
It is aggressive, but
I don't know how much of aggro Druid you have been playing against, but when I get Firefly, Coin Firefly, Innervate, Sir Finley Murgleton, buff everything for +1/+1 on turn 1, I call that an aggro deck.
This is,
and
sorry,
really,
I know you're a wild specialist now, but this is...
No, that happens
Finley?
in standard too. Oh, nope, that's wild. Different 1-drop.
Hate to see that if you're a core
Shoot. Now everybody knows what I've been up to for the last month. Well,
meanwhile,
the point still stands. Aggro Druid does crazy things in the early couple of turns. You can innervate Fledgling on turn 1. You get a very large buffed board, usually by turn 3. And then not all of the decks choose to run Bittertide Hydra and Genzo. You can still see the Finja package in some of them. But when you tap out at 5 mana, I still don't know that I would call it a mid-range deck. Maybe a little bit more than it used to be.
It is certainly more of a mid-range deck than it used to be, but the jury will have to be out on whether or not we could call it maybe a low mana curve. I mean, you get to see him all the time in Wild.
I do, but I have been resolute in the fact that I am going to play more Standard this month than I did last month. I was playing some Gunther Mage this morning. Maybe I'll play some Aggro Druid.
I will fight.
All right,
you never know.
We're not actually going to see
Maybe I'll play
Aggro
Jade Druid.
Yeah.
You never know.
Jade Druid, both of the Druid archetypes right now are incredibly powerful just for very different reasons. Jade Druid certainly, as decks go, the king of the late game. It is the control buster. It can be tech to deal with aggro as well, but it's mostly there to keep decks honest, right? It is making sure that you're... And now, oddly enough, Quest Rogue keeps Jade Druid honest. Everyone's just out there holding all these other deck archetypes accountable.
Everybody wants everybody else to think that their deck is honest, when in fact it's just a deck full of dirty innervates and prep vanishes and crystal cores and fairy war axes, and own the fact that your deck does dumb things sometimes.
Sure.
Even Jade Druid does some silly stuff.
All right, well, we saw Slayer Max put up the official Bless RNG pose, and he is blessed and rewarded with a hand that goes pretty fast here. We see the Double Inquisitor, the War Leader, the Rallying Blade, so He's not going to have to wait long to get the fight going. As we see, though, it is very similar, if not the same list, to what Ender was playing. Has the Curator, has the Primordial Drake, the not-so-gentle Megasaur, in fact, what I would call vicious Megasaur.
Whew, he is angry. Yeah, the early aggressive turns from New Zealand's Paladin deck really can challenge the early aggression from the Druid, because there is quite literally none. The first several turns, the Druid is just choosing to ramp their mana. Occasionally, they do something crazy like Wild Growth and Innervate, Nourish, and then you haven't had the time to develop as much as the Paladin, and then the Druid just runs away with it. But usually you have enough time in the early game to be able to develop your initiative, push your board presence enough that the Druid is forced to react, and if you can push them off of those pivotal ramp turns, you can delay their game plan even further. Then you roll into your mid-game, you're pretty home free at that point. And the Paladin, once you get to Tyrion and the Druid doesn't have a large board state, you're looking pretty good.
Right, obviously, Druid does a lot of things well, but realistically, AoE, not so much these days. No. Swipe has a little bit of a tickle on the end of it and can be good against certain boards, but we don't see Starfall being run. Obviously, way back in the beginning days of Hearthstone, back when Wrath could hit face and Starfall could also hit face, we saw more of that in conjunction with Spell Power Boost, but Starfall has been out of the meta for a while. Now, there were a couple of options here for New Zealand. They're going ahead and choosing to just take it slow. They could have just jammed down the War Leader, but if the Wrath came out, then that's a big loss for that War Leader, when you could just be potentially making a wider board that the War Leader benefits from more. And if they had slammed the Rallying Blade there, Naviute would at 360 Windmill slam the Gluttonous Ooze. So the correct line, I think, what they did here.
Yeah, you said it yourself. The Druid struggles with dealing with wide board states. And by putting up a large board of small, annoying minions that the Druid still can't clear very cleanly, then sometimes you draw in a Gentle Megasaur and you can make these Murlocs kill Fandral and still exist.
All right, well, the turn there before looked like it was pretty clearly going to be Murloc War Leader, especially with the Fandral coming down, but we saw a little bit of ooh once the Megasaur came up, because the Megasaur could do a lot of really cool things here. But it's kind of... I think this is an important turn for Slayer Max, because I think he kind of needs to look and think, what is the main priority here? If I absolutely just have to live in a world where Fandral Staghelm is dead, the War Leader I know gets that done. The Gentle Megasaur is a little bit more of a risk, but the high roll opportunity here could be really big, and we see the Poisonous, and that is exactly what you want to see there. The attack wouldn't have been bad either, but would have taken multiple Murlocs to deal with it, and this is just going to be very simple. 1-1 trades into that, and pretty much from this point on, unless Naviute swipes the board, and actually even then, because of the health totals, it wouldn't matter much. Naviute really can't play much into the board, because everything he plays is just going to get destroyed.
This is the situation for New Zealand where they have the biggest board state. Rallying Blade, if you had played it and killed off 2 of your Murlocs, would have left a 1-3 on board, would have given you more potential with Murloc War Leader next turn, but by going with the Megasaur this turn, this was the best possible scenario. And now Slayer Max has the ability to kill off 2 other minions with 1-drops.
It's just, I mean, it's gross. You just look at that and you go, you kind of like visibly recoil. Just
you shudder a little bit.
Yeah, and then Slayer Max made a choice there. He could have gone ahead and just taken the safe bet with the War Leader. Traded in 2 minions. I don't even think they would have died. Yeah, he would have been able to trade in and keep one of the minions he traded with, but went ahead and just said, okay, I'm just going to go for it. I'm far enough ahead. Whatever happens, I'll be okay. And it has rewarded him.
Well, he is certainly in a very good position, but Navi has quite a nice hand as well. Jades are already at 3-3, and we know that the Gluttonous Ooze will come down when the Rallying Blade is played, so Navi's got a little bit of health gain, rolling into Eye of Blackpaw on turn 6, and...
I think he's just running out of time, though. He didn't get the ramp early on, so he's not going to be able to have any kind of those Druid time turns later on, which is really where he could start to stabilize. And if you're watching this at home and you maybe haven't seen this matchup before, if the Paladin gets the early start and is able to leverage the very powerful Murloc synergies, it is pretty difficult for the Druid to come back. The board gets too wide, it gets too big, too buff, hits too hard. You don't have anything that inherently deals with it, and a lot of times you're just innervate into Yogg and just see what happens, and that is still a long ways away for Naviute, and his hand is no removal. It is pretty much put stuff down into poisonous Murlocs that are also buffed by the War Leader, so this is I don't know that I would call this the darkest timeline per se, but this is a very dark timeline.
This is the dark ages in the Druid lifetime. You would much rather have a Primordial Drake plus an Innervate this turn, but by foregoing the hero power to kill off the 3/1 Inquisitor and instead using the Wild Growth, Navi's going to try to make something happen next turn with 7 mana. At least you can build up a bigger board state, but AoE is lacking for the Druid. There's just not much he's going to be able to do here. The single target in the early couple of turns was non-existent as well.
All right, so, I mean, Naviud can look at this and say, yay, I get to destroy a Relic.
Get to go back up to 8.
Yay,
and then
I
you
get to
are
concede.
Really dead? Oh, yeah.
I concede.
New Zealand's happy about that one. Slayer Max shot up a short prayer in the early game, and it did pay off. New Zealand now going to tie up this series. This has been one of the fastest 4-game series I think we've ever had on broadcast. We're going to be going to Game 5, so Navi fans, maybe you don't like to see him winning, but if you like to see him a second time, then here you go.
I mean, again, Australia has to win this. They were up 2-0. As you said, this has been a blisteringly fast series in pacing, but they're bringing aggro decks that, for the most part, we've seen a lot of aggro decks, and obviously they go fast. But if Australia wants to continue to keep their hopes alive to go to Stage 2, let alone win the inaugural Australia-New Zealand Bowl, they're going to have to win it here, and it's up to Naviud.
Yeah, this is a big game for sure. It is going to be Navi Oot taking on Ting Tong, who is the ace for New Zealand. Navi going to be on the Warrior, Ting Tong on the Priest. Priest has a couple of archetypes right now. Dragon Priest, still very viable. Combo Priest variants are personally my favorite kind of Priest right now. They have so much blowout potential, and they're a lot of fun to play. And then the Warrior, like we said before, very defined, aggressive versus control archetype. We've seen mostly aggressive decks thus far, including Pirate Warrior for New Zealand. Do you know much about Navi's personal play style?
I know he likes to both tank up and also rank up. Unfortunately, he can't tank up here, but yeah, in an ace match for Navi, we don't necessarily get to see it a lot in Hearthstone just because of the nature of the competitive formats, but it's always really cool to see a player on the class that is really the class they're advertised with, right, as being the best at. And Naviud is a control warrior player through and through. Just last month, he actually reached Legend with a non-quest warrior control deck. I played a ton of it. It's very, very powerful in certain matchups, and he's got the mind for it, so then again, he may just switch it up, call audible, and say I'm playing Pirate Warrior. Very curious to see what Ting Tong's Priest list is, because there was like a week where a lot of the pro players from all across the North American and European region were saying, okay, combo Priest is really, really powerful, but then as Shaman started to kind of rise up and evolve, became more of a thing, people kind of got a little bit quieter about that as Shaman kind of exploded back into ranked play. And, you know, obviously tournament format is different in terms of what you bring, but I do kind of wonder if that affects how you build that Priest deck. If you just kind of say, okay, we're going to kind of go back into Dragon Priest, maybe if there's some elements of Divine Spirit, Inner Fire, but we don't want to put all of our collective eggs into the Combo Priest basket.
Combo Priest has some really fantastic matchups. One, it annihilates Jade Druid. So good against Jade Druid just because they have no single target removal, they have no AoE. So if you can build up, you know, a large Radiant Elemental, there's really no way that they can deal with it in the early game. Also, it's very good against other Priest decks. So if you're expecting a lot of Jade Druid and a lot of other Priest builds, then I think you would definitely bring Combo Priest. But if you're not, I think you would expect Dragons. And that is what we're going to be seeing here. Navi, maybe not on that strictly non-quest control warrior train, but still about as controlling as a warrior deck you're going to see nowadays.
Like I said, this just does my heart joy. I love seeing players on their signature style and their signature deck, so it's going to be really awesome in Game 5 in this ace match, in the game that decides the whole series, to see him on a control warrior, Dragon Priest. Prior to set rotation, Dragon Priest was certainly more of a curve deck. It was more about getting that early game going, getting out the Twilight Whelp, getting out, just keep rolling. 2, 3, buff a minion, 4, Draconid Operative is obviously just one of the most powerful cards in the game, period. Yeah. It's absurd how powerful Draconid Operative is. It's good enough to where, with less dragon tools overall, it's still enough to build a deck around. So, point I'm making here is this Priest, back in the day, used to be able to just generate so much pressure in the early game that they could just kind of play beatdown style on control decks, but they've lost a lot of that, and a lot of the cool things they do now are based on the addition of Radiant Elemental and Lyra, and Primordial Drake is obviously, he's a big guy. He works out.
He is.
He's hard to deal with, so this matchup is if Elise is in this deck, this matchup gets really interesting because then you have Shadow Visions. You can begin looking for... That's pretty good dragon discovery.
3 dragons I'd like to see.
But if you're constantly generating resources, you can kind of outvalue the warrior even when they get to that Ragnaros hero power. But if not, at some point, despite how good the early game looks, the control warrior is going to get to a point where they're just killing one of your minions per turn if they're not hitting your face. And if you're not running greater healing potion, you don't have the ability for burst heal. So this is really interesting to me. And to be honest, I wouldn't call this for either player immediately. We really have to see how these first early turns go.
I think this one is quite close. I agree. The Dragon Priest, as a mid-range deck, has had historically great results against Control. Control Warrior specifically, because the removal tools for Control Warrior usually are 2 executes. You know, we used to have shield slams; those aren't included in decks anymore. You have usually the Quest Warriors have pretty much cut shield slam altogether in favor of Tar Creepers, Bloodhoof Braves. You've got the 2 brawls, and then you have the Whirlwind Fishes combos. So usually Whirlwind Fishes isn't going to be enough to clear off the dragons from the Dragon Priest. And Execute, you only have 2 of. Brawl, you don't want to pull the trigger on too early. So the Dragon Priest minions are still very well aligned against the Warrior minions, but the discovers for the Draconid Operatives have gotten weaker because a lot of the minions and cards in the Warrior deck now are situational removal and rather poor taunt minions overall.
The removal for Priest, too, lines up really well with a lot of the way the taunts are. They're just overstatted more towards defense, so the attacks are naturally... for a lot of them, 3 or lower. So Shadow Word Pain, Potion of Madness actually gets a lot of value in this one. If you're running Cabal Shadow Priest, which Singleton Priest nowadays is, back to running, that certainly gets a lot of use. So it kind of comes down to the late game, how much value the Priest can generate. And 2 Draconid Operatives, I mean, those are in addition to the other 2 in the deck. Those were just discovered.
Good cards, Rob.
Yeah, they're pretty good. Good cards, 13 out of 10. Heckin' good discover mechanic.
Heckin' good. Would play again. The Potion of Madness and the Ellie Armorsmiths, Bloodhoof Braves, Dirty Rats from the Warrior are actually a reason that I really enjoy Combo Priest up against Warrior. You can have just those sneaky lethals of, I don't have a minion on board, but I'm going to Potion of Madness your Ellie Armorsmith, double Divine Spirit, Inner Fire, kill you. So that is one of the reasons why occasionally you do see Dragon Priest running just a single copy of Divine Spirit Inner Fire in that sort of tech slot. It's not always necessary, but it is interesting when it finds its way into the deck because it creates very different dynamics in certain situations, and this is one of them.
Well, Navi got to see the 2 most terrifying words in all of Hearthstone right now, created by, that is the Draconid Operative, though, coming down. Curator, obviously going to be able to discover dragons. I don't expect to see beasts or murlocs picked off the Curator there, but there's a lot of dragons to pull from. Sleep with the Fishes can certainly be powerful. Brawl, also incredibly powerful, but the biggest issue right here for Naviute is Control Warrior has a lot of removal, and it's kind of how much is that going to be a factor later. Now, in his favor, Control Warrior doesn't really technically ever go that wide on the board. You're aiming to win with that hero power. It's a rather linear win condition with this quest, but it's certainly something that has to factor into all of his equations going forward. Now, question for you, Cora. With the Stonehill Defender, are you looking for something cheap just to get that quest online as soon as possible, or are you interested in maybe taking something a little bit heavier because you don't know the texture of New Zealand's hands?
I don't want to be that person that says it really depends on the situation, but it really depends on the situation, Rob. Completing the quest is the most important thing that Australia needs to keep in mind. The faster they do that, the faster they can have a dedicated removal for a minion every turn, or 8 damage to face, which can just end the game very quickly. So that is what you want to be working towards, but Naviute has an okay grasp on this board right now, all things considered. So maybe mid-range minions like Direhorn Hatchling or Ellie Armorsmith could give you that extra bit of board presence that you need that may just be enough to challenge the presence coming out from New Zealand. Direhorn Hatchling especially will give you the Matriarch when it dies. In the late game, one of the biggest issues for the Quest Warrior is not having continued follow-up once they have their quest online. You do need that minion pressure to be able to continue pushing on the board, and then you really just want to utilize that hero power as a source of removal every turn. And then you essentially will win the game through that because you will have more pressure and sometimes you just hit face for 8 and win the game that way. But realistically, they do suffer from lack of resources after the quest has been completed.
Very detailed analysis of how that goes. I completely
You
agree
asked
with...
me a question, and I wrote you the Great American Novel.
Yeah.
I expect like a gold star on my paper.
Chat, you can get up. It's over. The explanation is done. What do you like about these different picks, though? Do you like the
I like
Bloodhoof Brave?
Stegodon because it's a dinosaur. I like Bloodhoof Brave because it has Enrage. And I like Tarlord because it has 11 health.
All right, I like this. This was good. We should do this again sometime. I want you to just be around me when I'm choosing all my Discover mechanics and be like, do I pick this because it's a dinosaur? What do you think? You're like, well,
I
it is a
like
dinosaur.
dinosaurs.
All right, so Navu going ahead and rolling with that Bloodhoof Brave, equips the axe, gets a little bit of pressure in there, realizing that he would have had to trade the Axe Wing and the Enraged Bloodhoof Brave to go ahead and deal with that Dargon, so chooses not to.
Good job, Navi.
The menagerie is for guests only.
Well, there's another Draconin Operative. It is just a great day to be a Draconin Operative. You're just hanging out with all your friends. You thought you only had one other friend. You actually have 3 friends total.
Not to mention you're in, like, the Hearthstone FBI.
I mean, that's not really a thing.
It's cool.
No.
You're a secret agent.
We don't talk
You're
about
coming
that.
through. You're discovering cards, and in the meantime, you're solving crime. Dragon on dragon crime is a terrible thing to see, Rob.
I guess the only way this works in my headcanon is if there's like the Law and Order, like dun dun.
Dun dun.
Yeah.
Dun dun.
And then it's like
Dun,
Stranglethorn
dun,
board,
dun.
June
Dragon
1st.
Operative.
Yeah. I'd watch that. It's a pretty good show. Could definitely be an anime. Don't know about a live action show there, but
Maybe we can ask
Navi,
Navi if he wins. If he loses, we probably shouldn't ask him.
well, we won't have the chance to.
He
Don't
might
worry.
be upset.
We don't generally interview the people who don't win the match for that reason. It might be a little upset. But Navi just continuing to chug along, play taunt minions, just try not to get too far behind on the board, but realistically, unless he wanted to go ahead and use that execute on the Curator, which given how many resources are in Ting Tong's hand, it didn't really feel like that was a worthwhile use of it. All he can do is just keep playing taunts and hitting that armor up button he loves so much. One of his, if you don't know, one of his sub-icons, I believe, is the tank up.
I do miss it.
Yeah, it's the tank up icon, so.
It's a good one.
Out of curiosity, you played a lot of Wild. Did you, I played maybe to rank 10 last season, and I was really just running into a bunch of Dudeden, which is, of course, just all the dudes and all the buff dudes. And
Yeah.
Did you see a lot of any Justicar Trueheart?
No, not a single one.
Wow.
I can definitely see it in the dude Paladin, but you don't see it in Warrior because even the Warriors in Wild are all Quest Warriors, and you still don't need it there. So,
Fair.
not much Justicar to be seen, obviously not in Standard, and not much in Wild either. One of the maybe slight reprieves for Australia is that New Zealand does have 4 copies of Draconin Operative, but the resources that they're pulling aren't all that scary. They don't want to pick up Brawl or Sleep with the Fishes because they're going to be the ones with the board presence, and obviously you don't want to kill your own board in the process, and then the minions are just generally not all that threatening. So maybe it would have been beneficial for New Zealand to have picked up a copy of Ysera, knowing that there's only 2 sources of hard removal for Australia, but it's hard to deny that many additional resources with the Draconin Operative.
On one hand, you do want to be generating additional resources. On the other hand, one of the most comical things to me about Taunt Warrior is that a lot of the cards are actually pretty bad.
They're not good.
They basically build into like the Megazord. That's what makes them good, but as standalone pieces, to your point, like you really don't want the board clear because you want to be the one pushing, and a lot of the minions, I mean, yeah, Bloodhoof Brave. You can, you know, you can get the value trade and it buffs up to something that hits hard, but yeah, it's you're more upset. I think the most upsetting thing to Australia is the 5/6 Dragon. That's probably the most upsetting part of the equation. Now, on that last turn, Naviute went ahead and chose not to deal with the board at all. Just play an Acolyte of Pain, armor up. Obviously, we see Execute and Sleep with the Fishes in hand, and Australia, and really just Naviute in general, as a Control Warrior player, you expect him to have a great understanding of brinksmanship in this matchup and kind of when it's okay to finally expend those premium removal resources. And I mean, he's living up to this thus far. He's really showing just a ton of patience.
The mark of a very experienced Warrior player. You can be staring down a board of mid-range minions just like this that is very terrifying, but you need to know exactly when is your moment to make your move. And unfortunately for Naviute, I don't think that moment will be until he picks up a Brawl. And even then, the reload potential for Ting Tong is massive.
Ting Tong's just had these evil grins of a man who had 4 Draconid operatives.
He's like, I've got the FBI on my side. What do you have, Naviute? Minions.
He's like, Naviute doesn't even know I have another one I got for free.
And here's the thing. This entire game, Naviute has been working towards getting the Ragnaros hero power. Deals 8 damage every turn. When you have a board that is almost every minion is equal in power, but you have like 4 minions, and the only removal that Naviute has is that hero power, you're just going to kill them before that hero power even makes any difference. So it's just, yes, the Dragon Priest has lost a lot of its effectiveness, but it still lines up so very well against Control Warriors.
Well, the way Naviute is drawn, I mean, he hasn't seen a brawl, which is really getting to that point where, because you've lost Justicar Trueheart and the ability to just have that much armor generation, this damage, it may not necessarily seem like the most threatening. Obviously now with the Twilight Drake, it's a little bit more, but you have to deal with this board at some point. And Naviute just realistically has not had the opportunity. And these walls that he puts down that'd be so effective against more aggressive decks, like, hi, Priest is like, 2 mana, gone, get out of here, you don't get any armor. It's just really starting to go against Australia, at least in this final game, because I mean, this is a real shortcoming of Taunt Warrior in general.
Well, New Zealand not quite representing lethal here. But Naviute still does not pick up a way to deal with more than 1 minion. Now, he can run the War Axe into the Curator, Whirlwind, Sleep with the Fishes, and Execute. You're leaving 1 minion on board at the very least. And you're down to 15. Likely 17 after you armor up this turn, but how much more can you really deal with? Not much.
No, I mean, that's pretty much the summation of it. You really can't deal with much more, period. And honestly, if the next card from Naviute's deck isn't Brawl, or something that allows him, maybe Primordial Drake, like Sleep with the Fishes. Even Primordial Drake, Sleep with the Fishes really doesn't do much. You got a 9 health, 6 health, and a 6 health, so again, that's an extremely powerful combo against a lot of decks. Realistically, just with the way these minions are statted, it's not doing a whole lot, and he's talking it over with the rest of his team and trying to figure out exactly what he needs to be doing, but we see the armor up, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see pass, yeah.
Okay, so if Navi does pick up the Primordial Drake off the top, he can Whirlwind, Primordial Drake, Coin Sleep with the Fishes, and then run the weapon into the Twilight Drake, which would be a full clear then, but that would need to be Brawl or Primordial Drake off the top for Navi to be able to deal with this board. But by holding on to his resources, he is giving himself the best and only chance that he has of dealing with the minions from New Zealand.
And those Historians in the early game were just...
They were absolutely killer.
They had so many good choices there, too. And that's, you know, some of the less favorable dragons to get to are actually gone with set rotation. You don't have to worry about running into Volcanic Drake, Twilight Whelp.
Yeah, you still have Midnight Drake.
You still have Midnight Drake.
That's about as bad as it gets. So one of the upsides of Blackrock Mountain having rotated is that the Priest now pretty much only has beneficial choices coming out. The Nether Spite discovers Battle Rage off the top. I ain't talking. Brawl or bust, buddy.
I'm going to go ahead and take the opportunity to get 2 draws off the Battle Rage here, and yeah, it's got to be Brawl.
Drake was 1 card off.
We see Naviute just go ahead and accept his fate, and that's going to be it. New Zealand going to go ahead and turn this one around and win 3-2.
I mean, we said it. It's certainly not impossible to get the reverse. We've seen quite a few of them in the Hearthstone Global Games, and now we have yet another. So if our calculations were correct, Rob, that means that Australia is now mathematically eliminated from making it to Stage 2 of the Hearthstone Global Games. New Zealand, however, going up to a 3-1 record, is looking very likely to advance.
Right, in this series, this whole series, I gotta say, like, sometimes when you're casting Hearthstone, you see these matches where there's a lot of very intense decision-making that kind of textures how the series go. But to be completely honest, this one, a lot of the times in the games, the win condition for one deck was just very pronounced, and you saw them execute it correctly. There were very few situations where you had to make any hard decisions, and sometimes the games just come down to that and the way the matchups go. But yeah, in that last game right there, we even saw that the Priest was just able to keep putting out pressure. Navi never got to the brawl, never had that big equalizer turn, and sometimes that happens, unfortunately. But let's go ahead and take a look at the final score for this series. As we can see here, it ended up going to the ace match. New Zealand managing to turn it around after going down 0-2.
Flame Lord, Slayer Max, and Tang Tong getting wins for the New Zealand team. Unfortunately, Australia was not able to pick up this very pivotal win, and it is looking like they will not be able to make it to stage 2 of this tournament. But even more importantly, the battle of the Thunder from down under. It was New Zealand who came out on top. They are now the Thunder above.
Yeah, Australia is going to go have to give New Zealand a Vegemite sandwich and just say, good luck out there. You now represent all the ANZ.
Here's some Tim Tams. Do with them what you will.
All right, we see here in Group C now, Australia and Spain are out. Austria is still hanging around. They have one more match against Australia. They could potentially go up to 3-2, but if memory serves, New Zealand did beat them. So this was very bad for Austria if they want to try to get out of the group. So from what we can see now, it is going to be Russia, New Zealand, and Argentina advancing. I believe there's still some slight wrinkles to be ironed out, but New Zealand in a great situation. And if they beat Russia, they can actually take first place in this group, which is not half bad for a group that came in with, you know, even Pather admitting there were question marks about the group.
Yeah, to have come this far, even just within a group that had a lot of big contenders in it, being 3-1 after I think we actually saw them personally say that they didn't have very high expectations for this tournament. Now to have this much success, maybe they might want to be rethinking, you know, having some confidence.
Sure.
Showing the rest of the world that New Zealand is actually a team to watch.
All right, well, we have Pather standing by for an interview. So, Pather, first and foremost, congratulations on winning the inaugural Australia-New Zealand Bowl. New Zealand's the champion.
Hi, Robert. Hi, Cora. Oh, my God. We're so excited. Oh, my God. I could cry. It was so close.
That was a close match.
What was going through your guys' heads when you went down 0-2? Did you think it was over?
No, we were like, we could sweep this. We can do it. Come on, guys. We have, like, Paladin. It's so strong. We have a good matchup later, which was the Priest against... We were thinking their Warrior was Pirate because it was matched up against their... J Druid, but it was Taunt Warrior. But good thing our Priest, that game was so intense, the Priest versus the Taunt Warrior. But good thing we came out on top.
Turns out that 4 Draconid operatives is just better than 2 Draconid operatives.
That is a good number of operatives there. So what's it like, the relationship between the Australian and New Zealand team? Obviously, there's some sporting rivalries to consider, but what's it like between you guys?
There's no bad blood or anything. It's always just been like that growing up. Every sports related thing, it's always like New Zealand versus Australia, who will come on top with rugby or any other sport. So just like in Hearthstone, I'm just so happy New Zealand took this win.
Right, so one more match for you left to play. Your final opponent is going to be Russia, and you know it's no secret people looked at Russia as the team to beat in this group. Now, if you guys beat them, you actually come out of this group 4-1, and again, you all advance, so it's kind of a pride point. But do you guys think you're going to beat Russia and win the group?
I'd love to beat Russia. Then we would be on top, right?
You would.
So yeah, let's see what happens there. But they're definitely a strong team, and I look forward to that match definitely.
All right, well, before we let you go, anything you and the rest of the team want to say to all the fans out there, both in and outside of New Zealand?
Thank you so much for supporting Team New Zealand, guys. Watch out for us in the next match.
All right, thank you so much for your time, Pathra.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
It's cool to see how excited they were. We've been talking to the players, really a lot of the players, as we've been going on through stage 1 of the Hearthstone Global Games. And, you know, when I talked to Pather earlier on after they got their first win, she was saying that she wasn't really sure what to expect from her team or how they thought New Zealand was going to do. But here they are now on the verge of potentially taking first place in Group C.
I love that. I'm always a fan of the underdog. I love rooting for the little guy. People may not necessarily know much about, maybe they don't have the best results, but seeing them put in the time, put in the hard work, and have success. Countries like Italy, like Turkey, like New Zealand, Malaysia, Argentina in this tournament. Bulgaria are doing so well. They're doing so well in their groups, and they're really putting the pressure on the titans of Hearthstone, like the Russias, the South Koreas, the USAs, to really step up their own game. And that makes this tournament that much more exciting to watch.
Certainly been a ton of fun to watch. Now, we obviously only had one series tonight. We're going to go back to 2 on the next week. This was just, there was so much action in this bowl game that we just had to make sure that we were giving it the correct attention it deserved. Now, this weekend, we have the final of the spring playoffs coming up. We're going to be journeying to Asia Pacific. Always exciting to watch Asia Pacific play Hearthstone. As a region, they bring so many different decks. They don't necessarily all subscribe to one overarching theory in the meta because they're so spread out. They're all approaching the game differently. Ton of fun to watch.
It absolutely is. I will not be a part of HCT Asia Pacific this week, but it's actually going to be Jvarg and Neptune who come out of So You Think You Can Cast from this year. They casted at the TESPA Finals, so they are going to be taking their first dip into the Asia Pacific meta. So I'm excited to see how they do this weekend. And of course, fan favorites Pin Ping Ho is coming back. We've got some other great Asia Pacific players that are definitely going to have some deck lists to watch out for.
Certainly, my recommendation, watch out for Tom60229. I think he's going to go ahead and get in there and make some work get done. But it's going to do it for us. We will be back next week. Again, only 2 more weeks left in Stage 1, so we're going to see all the groups finally start to come together and know who is advancing to Stage 2. But for myself, Cora, the production team here at the ESL Studios in Burbank, California, guys, have a great weekend.